Okay friends, it's time to get started on replacing our water pump. The water pump is part of your cooling system, so we're going to need to drain it. With that said, you want to make sure that the radiator cap and your cooling system overall is cool to the touch. We're going to go ahead and grab onto this radiator cap, turn it counterclockwise, and lift it up and away from our face. Inspect it, set it aside. Now let's go ahead and get underneath the front of the vehicle. Now from underneath the vehicle, we're going to have to go ahead and remove this plastic shield. Typically, you're going to find a whole bunch of push clips on this. To remove these, what you want to do is just get right inside the center. We're going to go ahead and take out the center aspect of it, and then you can remove the entire portion, including the outer aspect. Go ahead and remove all of those. Typically, there's going to be several that come across here. We're missing a lot of them. After that, we're going to come up across to the front right here and remove all of our 10mm headed bolts and then the shield. Now that we have that out of the way, we have a nice clear view of our lower radiator hose. Right to the left of that, or towards the driver's side, you're going to find the petcock. That's the drain for the cooling system. What you'd essentially want to do is turn this counterclockwise, and that's going to release the coolant. So make sure you have a nice collection bucket underneath the area, hand and eye protection at all times. Now while we have that draining, the next thing that you're going to want to do is safely raise and support the passenger side front of your vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. After that, if you have a hubcap, go ahead and remove that. Remove all 4 of your 21mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Once you have the wheel off, the next area that we want to move along to is this area right here. This is just a plastic panel that's held on by a whole bunch of push pins. Remove them all. That one's pretty much out anyway. Remove the panel. Now that that panel is out of the way, let's move along to our tensioner. This is the pulley right here, and essentially what we need to do is use a 14mm wrench on this area here. We're going to turn this clockwise, which is going to relieve the tension from the belt so we can remove the belt from the area. Just slide that off of any pulley you can. We get our wrench out of here. And let's get the belt out of the way. Slide that right off into the side. Now we can move along to removing 2 of our mounting bolts for the water pump. The water pump's located right here. You're going to find one of the mounting bolts right there, down on the lower aspect, and then there's one that's a little bit higher up and a little bit harder to get to. Let's remove the pair. To be able to access this a little bit easier, I'm just going to use my 14mm wrench on the tensioner. I'm going to turn this clockwise, and then I'll just take a 19mm socket. We'll put it right on the crank pulley here. Now we can leave that just like this, and that gives us access to that upper bolt. Now if you wanted to, you can go ahead and remove this plastic piece right here so that you have plenty of access in this area. Overall, you should be able to reach these bolts fairly easily with a 10mm. Once you have this top one loose, generally you can just kind of turn it by hand. There it is. Get that out of there. And now we can get back up into the engine compartment. Now that the coolant's done draining, let's go ahead and close that petcock. Just going to turn it all the way clockwise. Once it bottoms out, just kind of give it a little bit extra, make sure it's nice and snug. You don't want that leaking on you. All right, now we can go ahead and remove our last 2 mounting bolts for the water pump. These are going to be located directly underneath the alternator on the inboard aspect of this. You can see one right here where my screwdriver is touching up against, and the other one's located right below it. Let's use our 10mm and some extensions to remove those 2 bolts. There's that one, set it aside, do the same to the other. Now I'm just going to use a nice pry bar and a hammer. I'm going to give this a couple loving bonks just to try to break it free. Go ahead and grab onto that water pump, and we'll slide it right out of here. There it is, friends. So we made our way back down into the wheel well here, and we can kind of see the engine where the water pump's supposed to be. To be able to have a little bit more access in the area for the camera and of course for my hands to do the job, I'm just going to come under here and I'm going to unscrew my 2 screws that are holding this up. I can move this and get it out of the way. Now we're going to continue with a nice flat razor blade, and we're just going to try to scrape down the areas of the engine where the seal's going to be. Got a big chunk here. You want to ensure that you get off any debris that's inside this area. It could potentially cause a leak while you're driving down the road. Once you have it completely scraped down, go ahead and wipe it off. Make sure that you inspect the entire area very carefully. Like I said before, you want to make sure you get off any of the debris that's in this area. Once you have that cleaned up, let's move along to cleaning the threads on all of our mounting bolts. Now, once you have everything cleaned up, let's make our way back up and into the engine compartment. We're going to get ready to install our brand new water pump. To do that, you're going to want to make sure that you have your gasket in the proper orientation. If you have it upside down, you're going to notice that none of the holes line up perfectly, and you're going to have an issue where it's not going to seal properly. Now, once I have that on there, I'm going to go ahead and put this onto the engine, then we'll start in 2 of our mounting bolts. Alright, so now that I have both of these bolts up here started, I'm just going to go ahead and bring them so they're almost bottomed out, but I can still move the water pump around a little bit. And then I'll go ahead and get back down into that wheel well, and I'll put in the other 2 bolts. We can snug those up, and then we'll start torquing everything down. Now once you have them all snug, go ahead and torque these to 18 foot-pounds. Now let's go ahead and take care of our belt here. We're going to take this and we're going to put it right up and over the top of the alternator pulley here. You can tell that it has a whole bunch of teeth on it. You want to make sure that the grooves on the belt line up with those. After that, I'm just going to go ahead and carefully slide it around this water pump and then bring it like that. Once you have it so it looks like it's semi-set up top here, we'll just go ahead and get back down underneath so we can continue setting it up under there. From inside the wheel well, let's go ahead and take the belt. We already have it coming around the water pump here. We brought it down and around the AC compressor this way. It's going to essentially come around the crank as well, and then the back side of the belt is going to be rubbing up against our tensioner pulley. Just going to try to get it into position here. So now that it looks as though I have everything as lined up as possible, I'm just going to continue on by retracting this a little bit more so I can get my belt on this. So now that we have the belt on there, you just want to inspect it real quick. You want to make sure that it's sitting inside all the grooves on all the grooved pulleys, and then of course just make sure that it's not trying to make its way off of any of the other pulleys. Make sure you double check everything. As you can tell right up along this area here, the belt is actually trying to come off of this pulley. If that's the case, just go ahead and release the tension and then slide it into position. This one feels good. This feels good. Double check that alternator up top, and then we'll continue on by putting all this back together. If you move this shield, let's go ahead and reinstall that now. It needs to fit in and behind the back side of the bumper cover. Just gently pull out on that. You can get it lined up. Then looking at this, you're going to be able to find that you have some white areas that are actually threaded for these bolts to go into. There should be several of them coming across. Let's go ahead and put those up and inside the bumper cover here. We'll get them lined up, start in both of our screws, or all of them, depending on how many you took out, and then we'll snug them up. Let's go ahead and get our shield up in here. Make sure that you reinstall any of the push clips that you might have happened to have removed. Push in the outer portion first, and then lock it in with the center. Now we can start putting this shield up here. You can start with the bolts or the push clips, whatever you want to do, but essentially just put them all back in and then snug them up. All right, let's get our wheel up on here. Now we can start on all of our lug nuts. We'll get the wheel back down on the ground and then we'll torque these to 80 foot-pounds. Now once you have all of your lug nuts torqued, we're going to go ahead and put on our hubcap. You want to pay attention to the valve stem hole. That's this area right here. Make sure it lines up with the valve stem. After that, go ahead and give it a couple loving bonks all the way around. Make sure it's secure so it doesn't fall off while you're driving down the road. Now back up under the hood, the next thing that we want to do is start filling our cooling system. Typically, people are going to have something that looks like this, which essentially is a funnel, and it's going to help burp out any of the air that's in the system. What you would want to do is go ahead and take out the center plug there, and then you're just going to fill this up with the manufacturer's specified coolant. After that, you just want to go ahead and run the vehicle for a little while until you hear the cooling fans turn on. Once that happens, overall, all the air should be burped out of the system. Alright, so now at this point, we ran the vehicle until the cooling fans turned on. I went ahead and I turned it off, and I waited for all the air to burp out of the system. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and plug this up. I'll squeeze the hose a little bit. We'll plug this. We can remove that. Unscrew this. And now we can go ahead and put the radiator cap back on. Once you have the radiator cap back on, it's always a good idea to make sure that you go over to the passenger side and just double check to make sure that the coolant overflow is full. If it's not, just come over here to this yellow cap and then top it off. Generally, you don't want to pull it all the way up to the top, just approximately 3/4 of the way up. Okay friends, we got the car all back together. What's left to do now? The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you clean up any of the coolant mess that you happen to have made. You don't want any of that seeping into the environment. Other than that, go ahead and take it for a road test. While you're on your road test, make sure that you have plenty of heat coming from those vents. That's super important. Other than that, when you come back from the road test, just take a quick peek underneath the vehicle and ensure that you don't have any coolant leaks. Thanks for watching.